In the music industry, there is a special club called the 27 Club, and it includes the likes of famous rock stars including Kurt Cobain, Amy Winehouse, and Jim Morrison. But you probably don't want to be part of this society because that means you will be dead. But a new study says the club is bogus. I'm Ramy Inocencio for the Wall Street Journal Digital Network. Dianna Kenney is a professor of psychology and music at the University of Sydney and the author behind this new research. Now, Professor Kenney, what's your biggest finding here?
The biggest finding is that as a population, pop musicians live approximately 25 years less than the general population. And I've studied this over 7 decades, and the difference holds across the whole 7 decades.
Now, in terms of, a quarter of a century, that is a huge amount of time. I understand 50 years versus an average of 75 years for males and 60 years versus an average of 80 years for females. It pretty much shows the life of a rocker is still pretty risky.
Yes, it is. It's very risky. It does seem to be showing some trends in some areas, such as accidental death, to be decreasing, and even the suicide rates are finally showing a trend to reduce, but they're still 3 to 5 times higher than the general American population.
Right. Now, explain the details of this study. I understand that you polled more than 10,000 people, maybe more than 12,000 people or so. Walk us through what you actually did.
I accessed all the available information on pop musicians who had died between 1950 and 2014. And I accessed and found as much information as I could on the age of death, the decade in which they died, and their cause of death. And then I pooled all this data and compared it with population data, age corrected, for the American population in those same 7 decades.
In your research, you say that emotional support and guidance really isn't available to musicians these days. Justin Bieber comes to mind over the past few years. We've seen his rise, and unfortunately, we've seen some of his fall. What needs to be done in order to address this?
Too much pressure on young people to enter that kind of lifestyle too early before they're emotionally mature to cope with it. And we also find that many young people who do become part of the pop music industry already have some psychological issues, major psychological issues that haven't really been addressed. And entering a very high-risk profession like the pop music profession amplifies these early psychopathologies. And this is what I think is partly responsible for the early death rates.
All right, Professor Dianna Kenney, Professor of Psychology and Music at the University of Sydney. Thanks so much for the analysis and the very interesting study.